be home. What a joy it was to walk in the back door and be greeted by friends and colleagues for many, many years. It just reminds me I've been around here a long time. I love Rotary, and my introduction to Rotary really came through a group study exchange in which I participated in 1980s. Now I have to think about the ages of my children to remember any dates at all, but about 1984, I believe. I spent 5 weeks in Sweden on behalf of Rotary in exchange from this district, and it was a wonderful experience. Came back to North Carolina, and Henry Cranford, who many of you knew, sponsored me as the second woman member of the Dilworth Rotary Club. Louise Brennan was introduced 2 weeks before I joined the club, and John, you remember that. It was a wonderful honor to follow her in that club, and was a member there until we moved from the Charlotte area. The last time that I spoke to this club, I remembered as I was driving in early this morning to Charlotte, I shared the podium with Bill Lee. And I remember that he called me and he said, Sharon, I'd love for you to come help me talk about the quality initiatives at Duke and the change that we want to bring about for this company. And so I had the honor of sharing this podium with him, and it was an honor indeed. That would have been probably about 1988, 89. So it's been a long time, so it's really nice to be back. Marilyn, thank you for the invitation. Judge Costangi, thank you for the very warm introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you this morning. Several folks have said to me, Sharon, I thought you were headed into the ministry. What is a Presbyterian lay pastor doing as the Secretary of Commerce? And my response is always the same. Prayer is the most important skill in this job. And I've spent the last 5 years in preparation and in pastoral ministry in preparation for this, where prayer is daily used and probably the best skill I can have, as I stay focused every day on jobs for North Carolinians. That's the assignment this governor gave to me. I wouldn't have said yes to many people in this world, and in fact, had there'd been a call from somebody in this room reached out to me through Facebook, actually, Sharon, what you doing? What are you up to? And I gave this long diatribe, didn't I, about, I'm about to finish my Master's of Divinity. I've been doing a lot of spiritual direction. I worked at UVA this last year. I'm going back there to be the chaplain at the Darden School, at the UVA School of Law. And so I thought that put all that to rest, didn't I? And then the governor came calling, and I have great respect for Pat McCrory. And I'm passionate about his leadership in the state, and I said yes, and I'm glad that I did, because North Carolina is in need of new jobs. We've been in net job decline for 5 years, and we've got counties in our state, close to 22 of them, that have been in double-digit unemployment for now as many as 7 years, and it's not acceptable. And there have been a lot of good people working very hard to try to change things, but through a very dramatic downturn and through a lot of change, economically, socially, politically, we've simply got to change how we do business in terms of recruiting business to North Carolina. But there's an awful lot of good to build on, a lot of history of commercial growth, a lot of history of hard work and commitment to this great state. And that's what we've got to do, is build on what has been so right about North Carolina to grow this economy again. So every morning I get up in prayer and think about jobs for North Carolinians. I called Jim Martin about 6 weeks into this job, and I said, how in the world do you keep from going nuts? And he said, Sharon, wake up every morning and think about the goal in mind. And the goal in mind is jobs for North Carolinians. So I want to share a little bit about how I hope we can do that, because it's going to take all of us to do it, and it is private enterprise that will drive this economic change. The government has a role to play in economic stimulus, but there is a more important role to be made in private investment in this economy. That's where the change will take place. So I want to talk to you about that. But first, to say congratulations and thank you to Charlotte. Almost without exception, I've been here every 2 or 3 weeks for job announcements, and that's exciting. Like MetLife and Arriva, Rack Room Shoes, InView, XPO Logistics. You know the names, and it's exciting to see what's happened. Also, find that when I cut on the television, more often than not, I see some scene from Charlotte, right? 2012 was a record-breaking year for the film industry in North Carolina, $376 million in spending, 20,000 job opportunities in that time. You know Homeland here in Charlotte. You know that the Hunger Games were filmed in part here in Charlotte. Iron Man 3, which some of you have seen in recent months, filmed in Wilmington and in Rose Hill, North Carolina. and film has become a very important part of this economy. But you heard Tony talk a little bit last week about the opportunity in exports, but did you know that in 2012, exporting from the state was about a $29 billion business? And we have hardly scratched the surface. Less than 1%, 2% of North Carolina businesses export. So when we look at the opportunity for growth in this state, a lot of that opportunity comes from helping those of you who are already making things here and creating things here, export them all over the world. You know from reading Forbes that Charlotte's now ranked the 5th fastest growing city in the U.S. Number 1 happens to be the Research Triangle area in North Carolina as well. And according to the U.S. Census, Charlotte grew at the fastest rate of any urban area in the country, increasing almost at a 65% rate from 2000 to 2010. And part of what has helped Charlotte grow has been your focus on infrastructure, the governor's leadership when mayor here around the development of infrastructure, and we intend to capitalize on that infrastructure as we move people and product, not only across the state and interstate, but around the world. You know, there's a lot good going on in Charlotte. There's a lot good going on in the Triangle and the Triad. Economic engines that are going to drive the rest of North Carolina's economy. But as I travel across the state, I see a very different North Carolina, and I live in a different North Carolina. Rutherford County, the county that I now call home and have for the last 12 years, has been in double-digit unemployment for the last 8 years. A textile community that lost all of its textiles and hasn't quite found its footing yet in what will recreate jobs in that economy. But you know, there are winds against us in a state that really is principally made up of small towns with 3 economic engines along the center part of the state, growing engines in Asheville and Wilmington. But there are winds turning against us in that we are living in an urbanized economy worldwide, right? My children talk about the places they want to live and go, and it's not exactly Rutherfordton, I'll tell you that. You know, they want to be in the cities where there's engagement and opportunity, where there's a lot of culture and activity, where there are jobs and opportunity. And so there are winds that are turning that we needn't try to fight against, but find the ways to capitalize on them. And there are several ways that I think that we can do this. And the first off, in our case, is getting the Department of Commerce refocused on the state's economy. Over the years, in the last 20 years, we've slowly but surely kind of bifurcated and spread out the economic development dollars. And what we're trying to do is get real clarity of focus on that again. You heard in the papers, read in the media about the forming of a public-private partnership. This is what we are doing for the state of North Carolina. Hopefully that legislation will come to the House and to the Senate over the next 10 days. And the effort is this, simply to allow us to move at the speed of business. The governor told me when he offered me this opportunity, he had, Sharon, there's been some discovery around the idea of a public-private partnership. We'd love you to look at that, consider whether that's the right thing to do. Thought that I'd study that for about a year and then we'd get into it. But I realized very quickly it was time for pretty radical change, to build on a lot of good work, to get clarity of focus again, to eliminate duplication, to streamline the processes, to leverage public dollars with private dollars, and to allow us to move faster. As one of the CEOs said to me that chose not to come to North Carolina, he said, Sharon, it wasn't our choice not to come because this wasn't a great place to live and work. It wasn't our choice not to come because the state didn't have a competitive offer. You were just too slow getting it all together. And so we've got to move faster, and we've got to be able to compete at a global level, and that means being on the balls of our feet every day, all day, ready to go, not only in recruiting business to North Carolina, but helping existing business grow. And that's part of the balance I want us to find. It's not only recruiting, it's very important that we continue that focus in this economy, but helping those of you who are already in business here grow what you've got. We think there's some things that we can do from a policy standpoint. You know the work we're doing in tax reform, but we think there are a lot of things that can be done to help existing business grow a lot faster. Exporting is one of those. So you've heard the governor talk about economy, education, efficiency. I just want to talk about the economy. And to go back to where I'm focusing the context for economic growth, I go back to the early 50s in North Carolina. Not a dissimilar kind of economic situation for us. And our economy grew very successfully because we focused on 5 tenets, and we're right back there again. Health, education, economic development, tourism, arts and culture, quality of life, and the environment. Let's talk about all 5 of those very quickly, and then I want to open it up for some questions. Health. Every North Carolinian deserves the opportunity to live a healthy life. Now, you and I might not always choose a healthy life, right? But we ought to have the opportunity, and that goes from clean air to farm-to-table initiatives. It goes from access to health care and affordable health care. It goes to living walkable communities where folks stay active physically and are engaged in the environment. Health is a very important part of an economic recovery because one of the most important things we can give employers, you included, is healthy employees, right? What's one of your most important and most significant rising costs? The cost of health care. What's the most significant way we can avoid that? Healthy people. So health has got to be a part of our economic recovery. Second is education, and you know the story, no surprise. North Carolina has been a leader in education all along these years, but there's a lot of work we've got to do to stay in that game. And there's one point I want to mention to you that I want you just to think about. I grew up in Gastonia, in the Flint Groves community. That meant that the church my father pastored was named for the Flint Mill and the Groves Mill. And my world extended from the Groves Gym to the Flint Groves Baptist Church to the church parsonage to the Flint Groves Elementary School to the Flint Mill and the Flint community. So you get the idea. It was a textile community, and that's what our life revolved around. And I can remember around the dinner table that as my parents and other parents were talking to us, they would say to us, particularly the young girls in the crowd, you can do anything and be anything you want to be in your life, but for God's sake, don't come work in the what? The mill. So we took that to heart and we didn't do that, right? And so my friends in the eastern part of North Carolina said, good gracious, Sharon, the same thing was being said around our dinner table. My daddy, who was a farmer, would say to me, you can be and do anything you want to be, but for God's sake, don't come back and work at the farm. And so guess where we need them today? Back in advanced manufacturing and in agribusiness. Now I want to stop here and I just want you to help me think about this, folks, because it starts around the dinner table at home. North Carolina is a manufacturing and agribusiness state at its core. We're a state that's been built on small business and entrepreneurship. And in this recovery, we've got to go back to what we know and do it better than we've ever done it. Now, manufacturing is different. It's advanced manufacturing. And it's highly technological. And it takes a different set of skills. And it's a different work environment. But we need young people who are excited again about being engaged in advanced manufacturing because it, in part, will be the key to North Carolina's recovery. We've got to do the same thing in agribusiness. I get so excited when I see these young people coming back to Rutherford County for the first time in 40 and 50 years, farming family land that has been fallow for a long time and saying we're getting back to organic gardening and clean food and we're going to do something here that our grandparents did and there's an opportunity. I sat with one of the most successful biotech firms in the state not long ago and the CEO said to me, Sharon, North Carolina is sitting poised to embrace one of the greatest opportunities in your economic history because you are sitting at the epicenter of agribusiness and bio-life science business in the world. You're sitting right in the middle of it. You've got the land, you've got the growing expertise. The technology has come here, the research is here in your universities, and if the state will embrace this as one of the key catalysts for this economic recovery, I think the opportunity belongs to North Carolina. And I think he's right about that. But it means re-engaging with our land. And so these are two areas that are critical for our success. Now you say, Sharon, why are you getting all into this as you think about education? Because we've got to open up our children's minds and our grandchildren's minds to the idea that these are areas for career opportunity and promise. Bill Starfin, our next door neighbor in Belmont for many years, said to me, Sharon, one of the greatest opportunities I have in this business that is doing very well is that when people think about careers in textiles, they think about the mill that I grew up in the summers. And what I manage today and what I operate today is a totally different kind of business. But still, in the carpet yarn spinning business, he said it's very hard. So he said, you know what I'm doing? Third graders in Gaston County are invited to tour my plant so they can see what's going on here. So helping our kids to understand the opportunity that exists in these areas, what Tony's doing with Siemens and others to get kids engaged in manufacturing in the junior high and high school years, to understand the opportunities here is critical from an education standpoint as we think about this economy recovering. But there's also education on the other end, folks. There are a lot of unemployed older adults in North Carolina who still have the physical energy and the wherewithal to work. But it means retraining for new jobs. And so education is a continuum. It goes on far beyond what we would have thought of as the university years. And I think that is a continuum that will not stop in this generation, but really will be a way of life forever. So education is critically important to us. Economic development, that means infrastructure. It also means recruiting and development of existing business and recruitment of small business. But it also means, the one I want to point out here, is connectivity. Folks, you know, we've had a huge initiative in our schools across the state to get kids with iPads and technology, but you know we have a large number of students in the state that can't take them home because they don't have any connectivity when they get there. There are still large pockets of North Carolina where connectivity is not a reality, and that's a shame, and it's something we've got to change. Because there should be no place in the state that folks should not have the ability to connect if that's where they want to locate a business or have a home enterprise, or children need to learn and be educated. So we've got a great framework in place, but now we've got to extend that last mile so that connectivity is not a barrier to economic growth in North Carolina. We've got some work to do there. And then tourism, arts, and culture. Funny that I mentioned that as a core tenet. But North Carolina uniquely, some of it God-given, has the ability to capitalize on this. I say tourism is the best kind of economic catalyst. We don't have to educate them, and we don't have to keep them when they get old. They come and visit, spend their money, and leave. So tourism is big business for North Carolina folks, and it needs to be even bigger, and it can be. There's tremendous opportunity for us in tourism, in film, in sports marketing. We've just scratched the surface, and what exists there is opportunity economically. And culture. Increasingly, as we have companies in the governor's office talking to us about business in North Carolina, they want to know, what's the music scene like? What kind of theater do you have? What kind of dance is available here? What kind of restaurants do you have? What's the culture like? Is there diversity? They want to know what the quality of life is like from a cultural standpoint. What you're doing here in Charlotte, what we're doing in our major cities, what I'm seeing wonderfully happening, even in our small communities, really helps shape the framework for attracting business to the state. And fifth, quality of life in the environment. Hundreds of research projects have been done, many interviews held about why people relocate business or stay in North Carolina. But you know what most of you would say to me if I asked you, why did you stay in North Carolina? If you asked me why I have chosen to stay in North Carolina with many opportunities to leave, the answer is pretty much the same. It's summed up. I was sitting by a Japanese CEO of a company that was adding about 300 jobs in Kinston, North Carolina. I was sitting beside him before we were making this announcement, and I leaned over to him and I said, tell me why you chose Kinston. And he looked at me with this big grin. He said, because I live here and I like it. He said, my boss, the chairman of the company, wanted me to take this company international, wanted me to go back abroad. And he had 2 other sites in the U.S. that he wanted me to consider. But he said, by gum, I knew that if I could get his attention, that we were going to do it here in North Carolina, because this is absolutely the best place to do business. It's the best place in the world to live. And he said, I've lived in a lot of places in this world. The quality of life that you and I have is unbelievable. To people who don't know the area or come here for the first time, they're amazed at your friendliness. They're amazed at your openness and generosity. They're amazed at the philanthropy that has helped create this community and creates the sense of community that is here. They're amazed by the churches and the synagogues and the temples and the sense of community that centers around the faith community in this area. They are amazed at the ability to get to the beaches and the mountains and be able to enjoy both, and the quality of life and living that is there. They're amazed at the beauty of the green grass and the trees around. My husband and I hosted a wedding on our little 25-acre farm in Rutherford County this weekend. The family, mostly from Baltimore in the Northwest, but at the wedding were folks from Baja, Seattle, New York State, and Florida. And the overwhelming comment was, we've never been a place so green. Never been to a place so green. I linger there to remind you that as we grow this economy, as we continue to develop, and the state continues to be successful, we have to be mindful that what we've been given is a gift. And we need to protect what is a quality of life and a sense of community and a beautiful environment that's so important for us to be aware of and acknowledge and respect. There are 5 tenets in our plan for economic growth. One of the 3 E's the governor talks about, and we don't think we can do this without a balanced focus on all of those. This process of change is hard. Everywhere I've been, the assignments that I was given at Duke and since then at Tanner have all been about leading change. And there's one thing that I know after doing this many, many times, is that change is hard and it's painful. But I feel like we're going about at the state level what you and I went about in our homes over the last several years in an extreme economic downturn. We had to reassess, what do we stop doing? What do we start doing? What do we change about what we're doing? And none of us liked having to go through it, but we didn't have any option, did we? And I think the matter of change that we're about for our state economically is not a matter of option either. We've been in net job decline for now 5 years, and we want to reverse that trend. And I think we're on a path to do that. Painfully, perhaps, in the process of change, but importantly, change for a positive sake. And that's the commitment that I give to you. That's what this is about. It's Jobs for North Carolinians, helping your business grow and helping others grow with you. With that, I'm just going to stop and say I'll take any questions that you have and be happy to answer any of those that you might have. Any questions?